Here's a novel idea for you. It's okay to be yourself. Simple. So simple. Possibly the easiest idea to convey to children. Now let's say you're writing a story about a wizard who lives in a society that hates magic. Hot shit, what a setup. BBC's Merlin has everything it needs to knock this one out of the park. And what do we get instead? An episode where a woman receives a lobotomy because she burps and farts. The official title of this episode is The Changeling, but in our house it's known only as the Lobotomy episode because there's really no other way to interpret it. This is a typical Freak of the Week plot. There are some evil blue fairies that put a fairy egg inside a baby, and for some reason when the girl grows up, she can't comb her hair, or smile, or wear high heels. Nothing really too serious, but that's not gonna stop the Merlin crew from treating her like a fucking freak. And even though we've never seen or heard of this character before, this is the episode where we learn Uther plans for Arthur to marry this girl. Now right away you probably realize that there's no real chance of this sticking. By this point in the series, the Arthur and Gwen romance is well underway, and we're not gonna lose track on that for a stupid joke plot. So our only real investment in the story is to see how Arthur gets out of it, and how Merlin stops the fairies. One night, while collecting plants, Merlin discovers that the princess's handmaiden is a pixie working for the fairies. He and Gaius instantly conclude that all of the princess's strange behavior is the result of fairy possession. It's never clear what this possession does, or how much of the princess is herself and how much is the fairy, but we do know there's a time limit, and if they don't get it out of her, then she's gonna be killed and the fairies will take over Camelot. So, like ethical health professionals, Merlin and Gaius make an untested drug and shove it down her throat without her consent.
Elena, this is gonna make you feel a whole lot better.
To wrap everything up, Merlin murders the baby fairy, the princess is cured, and for reasons we'll talk about later, she's spared the misery of marrying Arthur. The end. Now I've talked about my problems with this show before, and once again I want to say that if you enjoy it, by all means, don't let me stop you. But I figured this episode was worth diving into, because it covers pretty much everything that's wrong with the series as a whole. So let's get into it. You know, I can't believe we didn't talk about this last time, but the music in Merlin is just fucking awful. It's that super generic music that's mostly there to fill up time, and this being a joke episode, we get plenty of goofy melodies to convince us that what we're watching is funny. Like there's this one scene where the princess rides a horse, and a jaunty little tune starts playing, like, ooh, what's this? Antics are afoot. She's good at riding horses, that's the whole joke. I don't really see why it's funny, since Morgana rides one like every other episode. That's really what a lot of this series is, using exaggerated music and facial expressions to convince me of things the story otherwise fails to convey on its own. And there's a lot of that in this episode because they've got to play up how weird Princess Elena is. Everybody's got to stop and stare at her anytime she does anything even remotely offbeat. It's not like they all hate her. In fact, they go out of their way to mention what a good person she is. But it's all with the caveat of, oh, well, it's a good thing she is so nice because she'd be a total lost cause otherwise. Elena is aware that she's not exactly a traditional princess bride and expresses some anxiety about it.
I'm not the perfect princess, am I?
Poppycock. What does that mean anyway? Perfect princess. Sounds perfectly boring. You've got spirit, child. If Arthur's got half a brain, he'll recognise that.
So at this point, I'm thinking that's the moral of this episode. I mean, yeah, everything she just said is 100% correct. But at this point in the story, we already know the handmaiden is an evil pixie, so we're not supposed to trust anything she says. And sure enough, Elena does not come out of this taking pride in who she is. No, instead we have good old Merlin and Gaius here to cure her. And by the end of the episode, Elena looks like this. Wow, just so pretty. Basically a Barbie. It's good to see she's finally acting the way a woman should. And of course, aside from being mildly surprised, nobody questions this overnight turnaround. Not even her dad, who, until now, was portrayed as a pretty supportive parent. Like, is it not the least bit concerning that your daughter is acting like a completely different person? Some people might be bothered that I haven't mentioned Elena's chronic nightmares, or that time she ate a frog. And let's not forget that she will actually die if the fairy isn't removed. but no one else knew about those fantasy side effects. All they saw was a woman who seemed a little off. Elena's transformation into the perfect princess leaves us with the impression that there was something fundamentally wrong with who she was before. Even if everyone liked her when she was weird, they all agree that this is an improvement and she'll have a much happier life now that she conforms to society's expectations. This episode features a side character named Grunhilde, the disguised pixie who serves the princess and helps the fairies. It's implied that she's had this job since the girl was born, and we see that Elena trusts her and values her advice. While Grunhilde doesn't show any remorse for what she's doing, we do see that she has some genuinely tender moments with the princess. There's definitely evidence that they had a real connection, and on top of that, it's not as though she's entirely in control. The fairies make it very clear that they will kill her if anything goes wrong.
If the changeling is discovered, you will not be so useful anymore.
No.
Now, this should be an easy win. Here is a magical creature with every reason to have mixed feelings about what she's doing. The princess treats her like a family member, and there are no safe spaces for her in the magic or human world. It's a perfect opportunity to explore the moral dilemmas of survival under oppression. Yeah, that seems about right. Grunhilde is not remotely sympathetic. Despite the fairy's coercion and her close relationship with Elena, the show still presents her as a selfish, horny predator. The running side gag of this episode is that she's super into Gaius, and of course everything she does to try and seduce him is portrayed as ridiculous. Why? Seriously, who is Gaius to be turning down anyone? Is it wrong for pixies to get laid? Let Grunhilde fuck! The show just never misses an opportunity to attack its own premise. Merlin is a wizard who wants to end magical oppression, yet at nearly every turn, magic users are framed as evil and magic creatures are even worse. They don't deserve sympathy or empathy. The show will bend over backward to convince us that killing Uther would be complicated, but if you're anything other than human, it's not complicated at all. Murder those freaks. Some people will defend this by saying she's written to be bad. And yeah, that's exactly the problem. The story would have worked just fine without making Grunhilde an amoral sex fiend. It's actually worse for going that way because there's no follow-up after she's killed. No one cares that she dies. The most we get is...
Can't imagine what's happened to Grunhilde.
No, sure she'll turn up.
Seriously? This was Elena's closest companion, but aside from one question, she doesn't even mention it. Merlin and Gaius are the only ones who know about the fairy's plan, so from everyone else's perspective, Grunhilde is a normal person who vanishes, which is pretty fucking grim. Mr. I don't believe in murder Merlin just covertly executed this person.
Where is Grunhilde?
We'll look into it.
Man, what a bunch of jokers!
Some people might argue that it was self-defense, but I'm not buying it. I mean, really, what threat does she pose to Merlin, who we're consistently told is one of the most powerful people on Earth? I guess even trying to talk to her was out of the question. That frog tongue of hers was just too dangerous to risk it. Okay, so Arthur has to marry a princess, but he's already in love with Gwen the cleaning wench. Oh no, what's he gonna do? It's not like he can just say he doesn't love her and get out of it. I mean, this was a political marriage. Those were pretty serious.
You do not love me.
You do not love me either.
So every once in a while, someone will respond to my original Merlin video arguing that it's medieval times, so it's unfair to judge it by modern day morals, because this is clearly a super accurate period drama. If that's true, then those people should have a big problem with this episode, because Arthur's get out of jail free card is a speech about how he'll marry for love.
When I'm ready to be king, I'll be a much better king for the support and strength of a woman I love.
Aww. And yeah, that sounds like it would go totally well in Europe's touchy-feely Dark Ages. This isn't a historical show, it's a sitcom in Ren Fair cosplay. This episode is typical in that the stakes are very low for a series with genocide as the running background arc. It once again centers Arthur's feelings as the highest priority. What will the poor little prince do when he has to marry someone he doesn't love? Well, it turns out it's the same thing as every episode. Whatever the hell he wants. The fact that Elena never wanted to marry him either Arthur is irrelevant. You might think being cured of her fairy problem might give her the initiative to speak up, but it's the opposite. She just stands there quietly and waits for the men to figure things out. Meanwhile, Arthur's refusal to marry carries absolutely no consequences. In fact, he's rewarded for it as the old kings talk about how brave he is and that maybe it's time for things to change. Eventually. Someday. Definitely not now, but soon, when we feel like it. In a real kingdom, you might face resistance from the court or the citizens, but clearly that's not the case here. So there's no reason to bullshit us with this argument for slow and steady progress. Just change the laws now. What's stopping you? Well, we know what it is. They're selfish assholes who don't care about anyone but themselves. Once again, Arthur only resisted tradition because it affected him personally, and we're supposed to take that as evidence that he'll be the greatest king to ever walk the earth.
Good sense of humour. No, you're right, you've nothing in common.
Merlin is a dumb, silly, feel-good show primarily aimed at children, and lots of people like it for that, which is fine. But that makes it all the weirder that our protagonist is serving a family that is actively hunting his people to extinction. Children absorb information from anything that grabs their attention, so what exactly are they getting from Merlin? Well, in this episode, they learn that there's something demonstrably wrong with people who seem weird, and anyone who encourages you to be yourself is a gross, manipulative monster. This is why I can't even enjoy hate watching the show. Any humor I could have gotten from it is drowned out by its condescending self-righteousness. I'm screaming inside every time Merlin gives one of his "here's the moral of the episode" speeches.
I think you're mad. I think you're all mad. People should marry for love, not convenience. And if Uther thinks an unhappy king makes for a stronger kingdom, then he's wrong, because you may be destined to rule Camelot, but you have a choice. So how you do it?
Well, gee, Merlin, I think I will marry for love. He's just so smug as he stands there and reinforces the status quo. It's even more infuriating when you think about the fates of all the people who didn't come around to Merlin's way of thinking. It's just incredible that these people could make a show where they know the system is corrupt, and they still want you to support it at all costs. Episodes like this one go to show how completely oblivious they are. They can't even handle a simple message about being yourself. It's more important that we remind everyone that princes should marry for love. They are our lords and masters after all, and rather than question why that is, we should make sure they have all the support they need to maintain absolute power. So that's all I have to say on this episode, and it's all I have to say about Merlin. I really have no desire to return to the show, so this is probably the last time you're going to see it on this channel. So if you liked it, please like it, comment, subscribe, and share it. That really helps me out. Thank you to my patrons, thanks for watching, and see you guys next time.